Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am super excited to share with you all this video. This video has been a passion project for me because I have always loved the story of Queen Esther, and I'm very excited to share it with you all today. As I mentioned in my last video, this is a very different video to what I normally do, but it is still something that I want to do on my channel. Maybe not as frequently as my art videos, but I will be making more videos like this in the future. The story of Esther is a story of hope, faith, and destiny. The story of Esther is set in Persia, which is present-day Iran. The king of Persia is King Xerxes, the son of King Darius. King Xerxes was holding a banquet for a total of 180 days for the men of Persia, in which he displays the wealth and glory of his kingdom. After the 180 days, King Xerxes throws a second banquet for 7 days for his nobles. His queen, the Queen Vashti, also throws a banquet at this time for the women of the nobles. On the 7th day of the banquet, King Xerxes, drunk from all of the wine, commands that Queen Vashti be brought to him wearing her royal crown to display her beauty for all the men to see. However, the queen refuses to come, and this angers the king. The king, after consulting with his advisors, deposes Vashti of her crown, and commands that she never comes before him again. The king then starts a search for a new queen. The king ordered that all the young, beautiful, virgin women from all the provinces of the kingdom be brought to him so he could handpick his queen. However, before any woman was able to be presented to the king, they would have to undergo a 12-month beauty treatment. Hadassah, also known as Esther, was one of these women. However, she was orphaned at a young age, and so her cousin Mordecai cared for her. They, along with other Jews, chose to live in Persia instead of returning to a war-destroyed Jerusalem. Mordecai had forbidden Hadassah from sharing her true identity and nationality. This is why she went with the Persian name Esther instead of Hadassah, a Hebrew name. When Esther was brought to the palace, she won the favor of everyone who met her, including the king. The king chooses Esther to replace Queen Vashti. A little after Esther is made queen, her cousin Mordecai discovers a plot against the king and reports it to Esther, who in turn tells the king on his behalf, thus saving the king's life. The king's highest noble was Haman, an Agagite, which was a tribe that has a long history of being enemies of the Jews. The king had ordered that everyone was to kneel before Haman and to pay him honor. However, Mordecai, being a faithful Jew, would not. This further fuels his hatred towards the Jews, and he begins planning their annihilation. Haman goes to the king and tells him of a people who do not follow his laws and should be killed for disrespecting the king. Haman is making these false accusations about the Jews without naming them to trick the king into sentencing them to death. The king gives his signet ring to Haman, allowing him to do as he pleases. Haman was able to trick him into allowing him to write a decree in the king's name. It is important to note that when the king makes a decree and signs it with his ring, it cannot be changed or revoked. The decree set a date for all the Jews to be killed. When Mordecai heard of this, he sent a message to Queen Esther, telling him of Haman's plan, urging her to go in front of the king and plead for the Jews' life. Esther replied to him, reminding him of the law. If anyone, including the queen, would go before the king without being called, they would be sentenced to death. The only exception was if the king extends his golden scepter to the person. However, the queen also reminds Mordecai that the king hasn't called to see her in a month. Mordecai responds in Esther chapter 4 verse 13 and 14, saying, he sent back this answer, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. This finally convinces Esther as she replies in Esther chapter 4 verse 16. Go, gather all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Here Esther shows her humanity. Here we see Esther is scared. However, instead of calling the fast for the situation at hand, she calls the fast for herself, not the people. She lets herself be afraid, but doesn't allow that fear to stop her from her purpose in being queen. She knows the risks she's taking, but she also knows Mordecai's words are true. God placed her as queen, and for this reason, to save her people. This is her destiny. This is what she was called to do. Esther, understanding this, puts her faith in God and prepares herself. And on the 3rd day, Esther goes to the king, and the king, being happy to see her, extends his golden scepter to her, giving her her life. King Xerxes tells her in Esther chapter 5 verse 3, "Then the king asked, 'What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half of the kingdom, it will be given to you.' Esther then invites him and Haman to a banquet she prepared for them. In this banquet, the king again asks her for her petition, and she invites them both to a second banquet, to where she will give her actual petition. However, leaving the first banquet, Haman is delighted to be the only person besides the king to be invited. However, his happiness fades when he walks by Mordecai. Angered, Haman goes and builds a gallows for Mordecai to be killed on. But that same night, the king is unable to sleep, and he listens to the chronicles of the kingdom, in which he hears that he never honored Mordecai for saving his life. So he calls Haman and asks him how he would honor someone. Haman, thinking the king is referring to himself, tells the king that he should give the man a royal horse and a royal robe, and to be paraded through the streets of Persia. The king likes this and tells Haman to do all that he had said without leaving a single detail but unto Mordecai, for saving his life. Haman does as the king commands. The next day, at Esther's second banquet, she finally gives the king her petition, in Esther chapter 7 verse 3 through 8. Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life, this is my petition, and spare my people, this is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther said, "An adversary and enemy, the vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage and left his wine and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" The king then sentences Haman to be killed on the same gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. And after all of this, Esther reveals the truth of her relationship with Mordecai as her cousin. The king then gives all that belonged to Haman, including the signet ring, to Mordecai. Esther again pleads with the king, saying, "How can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" She begs him to put an end to the evil plan that Haman set in motion. King Xerxes answers in Esther chapter 8 verse 8 and 11. "Now write another decree in the king's name, in behalf of the Jews as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no documentation written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. Now the Jews, on the day they were supposed to be killed, have the right to fight back. And on that day the Jews overpowered the men who came against them, and won. Queen Esther's influence ran past her to her son King Artaxerxes, who also showed favor to the Jews and Jerusalem during his lifetime and rule. Queen Esther's sacrifice in the victory of the Jews is celebrated by the Jewish people on Purim, where they remember and celebrate their liberation from death and victory over their enemies. Queen Esther's story teaches us about destiny and having hope and faith in God and His hand working even if we cannot see it. For such a time as this, Esther was made queen to save the Jews from annihilation, and to raise a son, being half Jew and half Persian, to care for their Jewish people. God chose Esther because she had something that only she had, and that God had prepared for her. What is God preparing in you? Something that only you have, or something that you are. There are some things that only you can do, and God is preparing you for those things. God is preparing you for such a time as this. It is up to you if you, like Queen Esther, will risk it all to say, "If I perish, I perish," and do what God has chosen you to do. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and God bless you.